It was 11 at night, the first week of September. I had just switched off the workshop lights, my hands still smelling of walnut oil. 3 short knocks. I opened the door. Elena, my neighbor of 2 years, leaned a hand on the wooden frame, blonde hair over one shoulder, the porch light warm on her cheek. Her upstairs window was already off. She looked at me, not panicked, not flustered, and said quietly, "My husband's asleep. Are you free to talk?" And that was the night everything I thought I knew about that quiet street began to come undone. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I am 41 years old. I was born in Durham, North Carolina, and I moved to Asheville 8 years ago, 6 months after my father died. He was a shop teacher for 32 years. He taught me that a good cut is quiet, and a bad cut is loud, and most of life works the same way. When he was gone, the house in Durham felt like a room I had walked into by mistake. So I packed what fit into a truck and drove west into the mountains and started over in a small blue-gray one-story on a street called Rosemont in the Montford neighborhood. I am a woodworker. Custom furniture, tables, chairs, shelves, wooden boxes, the occasional cradle for a couple who trusts me with the first thing their child will sleep in. My workshop is a small building behind the house, cedar siding, 1 skylight, 3 windows facing east, so the morning light does the first sanding for free. I do not have a sign out front. I do not run ads. Word of mouth built the whole thing, and word of mouth keeps it fed. The house is quiet in a deliberate way. I turned the garage into a reading room, 2 chairs, 1 lamp, and a wall of shelves I built myself. I do not own a television. I own a record player, and more Bill Withers than any grown man probably should. I was married once. Danielle, a lawyer in Charlotte, who wanted a life louder than the one I could give her. No children. When we split 3 years ago, we split the way people split when they have already been apart for a long time. A signed paper, a short hug, no yelling. I do not carry bitterness. I carry the honest fact that some houses are not built for 2 people, and mine turned out to be one of them. My days had a shape. Up at 5:30, black coffee, a 5-kilometer run through Montford while the streetlights were still on, into the workshop by 7, a sandwich at noon, back in the shop until 5, reading until 10, lights out by 11, most nights. No dating apps, no social media. I did not call that discipline. I called it peace. Elena and Grant Marsh moved into the Craftsman next door 2 years ago in the spring. Grant traveled for work, commercial real estate, and his voice was the kind that carried across a fence whether you wanted it to or not. He drove a black Range Rover. He honked when Elena took too long coming out. He shouted into his phone from the back patio, and the cedar boards between our yards did nothing to stop the words. Elena taught art at Asheville High School. She watered her plants in the morning wearing a long cardigan even on warm days. She nodded at me over the fence, a short, careful nod, the kind you give a stranger you have decided is safe, but have not yet decided is anything else. About a month after they moved in, she knocked on my workshop door. She had a small wooden box she had bought at a thrift store, and she wanted her nephew's name Owen carved on the lid for his 7th birthday. I told her I would do it. I would not take money for it. While the glue on a fresh inlay was setting, I picked up a scrap of walnut from the floor and started carving. It became a small bird, about the size of a thumb, wings tucked, head slightly tilted, the way a wren watches you from a branch. When she came back for the box, I handed her the bird too. For a shelf somewhere, I said. She did not set it on the counter. She did not slip it into her purse. She placed it in the pocket of her cardigan, and her fingers closed around it once before she let go. I noticed, and then I let myself forget. Some men build things to fill a house. I build them because the shop stays quiet, and the wood doesn't lie. That was who I was for 2 years, a man who ran in the dark, worked in the sunlight, and mostly kept to himself. 2 years I lived next door to Elena Marsh, and thought I knew the shape of her days. I was wrong about almost all of it. It started in March. A hard spring rain came down on a Wednesday night, the kind of rain that finds every weakness in every house on the block. Around 10 in the morning, I heard her downspout give way, water pouring down the side of her house, hammering the flower bed, cutting a small trench into the mulch. Grant was in Chicago. Her Subaru was in the driveway. I got my ladder and my gutter kit and walked over. She opened the door in jeans and a paint-stained sweatshirt, saw the ladder, and said, "I was going to call somebody Monday." I said, "It is not going to hold until Monday." She let me work. 40 minutes on the ladder, one new bracket, a screw where a screw should have been from the beginning. When I climbed down, she had made coffee. 2 mugs. She handed me one and sat on the porch step, and after a while she said, "My mother died last year. Breast cancer. Fast." I said, "I am sorry." She said, "You are the first person on this street I have told." I sat down on the step next to her, not touching, not close enough to touch, and after a minute I said, "My father passed when I was 19. Stroke, at his kitchen table, coffee still in the cup when they found him." She did not say she was sorry. She just nodded once and looked out at the wet street. That was the thing about her that I noticed even then. She did not fill silence with words that were only there to fill it. We sat on that porch step for maybe 20 minutes, and neither one of us said a thing worth writing down. But the not saying meant something. I did not know yet how much. Later that afternoon, when I was carrying my ladder back across the yard, she came to her door and said, "Marcus, thank you." I lifted a hand and kept walking. I did not want her to have to say anything else. In April, she started watering the row of pots along our shared fence, the ones on my side. Little blue and white ceramic pots with basil and thyme, and one stubborn tomato plant I had given up on. She never mentioned it. I never mentioned it, but every third morning the soil in those pots was dark, and every third morning I would look out my kitchen window and see her retreating up her back stairs before the sun was fully over the ridge. Once I set a small bundle of fresh basil, wrapped in a paper towel, on the top step of her porch. She did not thank me. She started leaving me lemons from the tree on her side of the yard on my workshop step. That was how we were, a quiet ledger nobody else could read. In May, Grant came back for a stretch, and one night I heard them fighting through the wall. His voice, mostly. Something about credit cards, something about her mother's house, something about a friend of hers he did not approve of. I never heard her raise her voice back. I did not hear her voice at all. After a while, the back door opened and she stepped out into the yard and stood in the middle of it, arms wrapped around her elbows, staring at nothing. My workshop light was on. She could see it from where she stood. She did not come over. She would not have. But the next morning, when I opened my workshop door to go to work, there was a small white bakery box on the step, 6 blueberry muffins. No note. In June, I ran into her at the Asheville City Market on a Saturday morning. She was buying honey at a table run by a beekeeper from Fairview. She was standing with a friend, a small woman with silver hair and a linen dress, and when she saw me, her whole face did something I did not know how to read. She turned to the friend and said, "Jamie, this is my neighbor Marcus. The one I told you about. The one I told you about." Jamie looked at me the way a woman looks at a man when she has already heard his name at kitchen tables that were not his own. She smiled. She said, "So you are Marcus. Elena has told me you make beautiful things." I said something polite. I said something short. I paid for a jar of blackberry preserves I did not need, and I walked back to my truck, and I told myself Jamie meant the furniture. I told myself Elena had mentioned my furniture. That is what she meant. All the way home in the truck, I kept telling myself that. I kept telling myself that because the alternative was a thing I was not yet ready to hold in both hands. In July, I built a small porch table for my front step. Elena saw it from her driveway and asked if I would build 2 chairs to match. I said 3 weeks. It was the first time she had ever asked me for something that was for her own house. Not for a nephew, not for a gift. I made those chairs the way I make chairs for people I like, slower than I needed to, with mortises tighter than the joint required. When I delivered the chairs on a Sunday afternoon and set them on her porch, she held out both hands to take the second one, and her fingers brushed mine and stayed there half a second longer than they needed to. Then she pulled them back and looked at her front door, and she said, "Thank you, Marcus. They are perfect." In August, we lost power for 3 hours on a Tuesday night. The kind of southern August heat that makes the whole neighborhood step outside. I sat on my front porch with a cold beer, and Elena sat on hers, and we talked across the yard the way people had talked across yards before phones, about books she was teaching, about a trip to Chimney Rock she wanted to take, about a dream she had of one day opening a small art program for deaf kids because her cousin had lost her hearing at 7, and nobody had thought to hand her a paintbrush. She talked for nearly an hour. She never once mentioned Grant. I noticed, and I told myself I was noticing wrong. There was an afternoon that same month, hot and still, when I looked over the fence and saw her standing in her back garden, one hand in the pocket of that cardigan. I could see the small shape her fingers were closed around, the walnut bird, still in that pocket after 17 months. She did not know I was watching. I did not tell her, and I stood at my kitchen window for a full minute after she went inside, and I was not thinking about anything I could say out loud to another person. I began, without admitting it, to listen for her car in the afternoons, the turn of her Subaru into the driveway, the click of her door closing, small sounds that had become part of my day the way the hum of my planer had become part of my day background, until they were not there, and then everything felt wrong. Once, when I was delivering the porch chairs, Grant pulled in behind me. He watched me carry the second one up. He said, "How much do I owe you?" I said, already covered. He held my eyes a second longer than a man holds another man's eyes when the exchange is over. He did not thank me. He walked past me into his house, and Elena's face, from the corner of my eye, did something small and unhappy that I did not turn my head to see straight on. Elena, days later, said to me over the fence, "Sometimes moving fast is how you avoid feeling still." I did not ask her what she meant. I did not have to. I told myself I was reading too much into small kindnesses. That is the lie a lonely man learns to tell before he lets himself hope. I kept telling it for weeks. It got harder to believe. By the end of that summer, I understood something I could not say out loud yet. She was not just being neighborly, and I was not just being kind. Grant came back the first week of September from 2 weeks in Miami. On Friday morning, I was pulling the garage door off its rails to replace a bent panel. He walked over holding a bottle of red wine and a smile that did not reach anywhere near his eyes. "Marcus," he said, "been meaning to bring this over, for being such a good neighbor to my wife while I have been gone." I thanked him. I set the bottle on the workbench. He stood there another 20 seconds looking at the shop, at the wall of clamps, at the small photograph of my father I keep pinned above the drill press. Then he walked back across the yard without another word, and I stood in the doorway of my shop and watched him go, and I understood that I had just been marked. That night, through the wall, I heard him raising his voice. About what? I could not tell. I heard nothing from her at all. Not one word. The house went quiet around midnight, and I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the way a woman's silence can be the loudest sound in a house. Saturday morning she went to the market. I was reading on my front porch when Grant came up my walk without knocking and stopped at the top step. His hands were in his pockets. His voice was low. "Whatever you think you are doing over here, stop. She is mine. I know how women like her get bored. I know how they start looking around. I know how it goes, and I am telling you now, man to man, stop." I set the book down. I stood up. I kept my voice at the volume I use when a customer disagrees with a price. "Grant, nothing has happened, and I am going to ask you to leave my porch." He laughed, not loud, a short breath through his nose, and then he said, "You people always think you are the exception." I heard it. I did not answer it. I filed it. Every man of my complexion learns to file certain sentences the way an attorney files exhibits carefully, quietly, for the day they might be needed. I opened my front door, and I walked inside and I closed it behind me, and I did not slam it, because slamming it would have been a gift I had no intention of giving him. That afternoon Elena knocked on my workshop door. She looked tired in a way that was not about sleep. She said, "I do not know what he said to you this morning. I want to apologize for whatever it was." I told her she did not owe me an apology for a sentence she had not spoken. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "Marcus, he checks my phone. Every night, he knows my password. He listens to me in the kitchen through the baby monitor, and we do not have a baby. He calls it concern. He tells his friends it is how much he loves me." I have not been alone inside my own head in 3 years. I asked her the only question that mattered. "Are you safe?" She said, "He has never hit me, but I do not recognize myself in mirrors anymore, and I do not remember what my own laugh sounds like." I went to my desk. I wrote down a name and a number on a card. Vanessa Whitfield. My cousin, a family law attorney in Asheville, West Side, 13 years in practice. The calmest woman I have ever known in a courtroom. I told Elena, whatever you decide, Vanessa will listen first and talk later. She will not push you. Call her when you are ready, not before. Elena took the card and slid it into her cardigan pocket, where I knew, without having to look, the walnut bird was still keeping it company. By Sunday morning, Grant had started what I now understand was a very old strategy. He weaponized the truth. He posted a photograph on Facebook, the two of them at a restaurant in Charleston, a date night with my beautiful wife. The photograph was from a 4th of July weekend 3 months earlier. Nobody knew that but Elena and me. Then he sent an email to the neighborhood association, a long, careful, well-worded email about how certain individuals had been harassing his wife and how he was concerned for her safety and comfort. He did not use my name. He did not have to. There were 4 households on that block, and only one of them had a black man in it. Mrs. Halloran across the street had waved at me every morning for 6 years. On Monday, when I walked out to the mailbox, she was watering her hydrangeas. I said, "Morning, Mrs. Halloran." She looked up, saw who it was, and looked back down at her hose. I said her name again, softly. She did not answer. She went inside. I stood there for a moment with my hand still lifted in the air, and I lowered it, and I walked back up my walk without looking at any other house on the block. I stood at the mailbox for maybe 15 seconds with the mail in my hand, and I understood something old and ugly all over again, that a rumor moves faster than a fact on any street in this country, and faster still on a street where the fact happens to have my skin. I had been through it before. I had hoped this block would not make me go through it again. I was angry. I was not surprised. There is a difference between those two things at 41 that there is not at 25. I did not raise my voice. I did not knock on Grant's door. I did not go on Facebook to defend myself. I closed my workshop for the day. I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours with the unopened bottle of his wine in front of me, the label already looking bitter to me, and I thought. For a whole afternoon I thought about selling the house, loading the truck, driving to my sister in Raleigh for a month and figuring the rest out from there. My grandmother used to say a man cannot fight every fire on the block, and some blocks are not worth the water. I understood her, sitting there at that table. I understood her in a way I had not understood her when she was still alive. And then I thought about Elena, about her cardigan pocket, about the fact that she did not have anywhere else to go. And I did, and it was that inequality, that simple math that made me stay. I could leave. She could not. That mattered. You think fixing her gutter makes you a hero? Grant had said that morning on my porch, near the end. I built her life, or I had not answered him. But Elena, 3 days later, standing in my workshop again while I sanded a shelf, said something that I have never forgotten. She said, "He did not build my life. He rented it and started calling it his." Grant's porch light stayed on until 2 in the morning that whole week. His radio played sports talk through the fence at all hours. He was performing. He wanted the whole street to see how loud a man is willing to be when a woman quietly starts to leave. By Monday morning, Grant Marsh had made himself the loudest man on our street. He did not realize the quiet ones were the ones already deciding, which brings me back to 11 at night. She came inside. I closed the door behind her. She did not sit on the sofa. She sat at the kitchen table, the small oak one I had built the year I moved in, and that told me everything about the distance she needed for the conversation she had come to have. Sofas are for people you already know how to sit next to. Kitchen tables are for the things you have to name. She had a canvas tote with her. She reached inside and set 3 things down on the wood, one at a time, and lined them up between us like exhibits. First, a manila folder. Divorce papers, already filled out. Every line she could complete without a lawyer, completed. Every signature line where hers belonged, signed. Second, a small key on a plain silver ring. The key to the old Subaru in her garage, the one that had been hers before the marriage. The one Grant had told her, more than once, she should sell. Third, a small carved walnut bird, wings tucked, head slightly tilted. 2 years of the oil from her hand had darkened the grain. She looked at the bird for a long time before she looked at me. Then she said, I have kept this in every jacket I own for 2 years, Marcus. I moved it from pocket to pocket every morning. I put it through the wash by accident twice and dried it on the windowsill and kept moving it. Not because it is beautiful. Because you did not ask me to. I did not say anything. When someone comes to tell you the truth, the kindest thing you can do is get out of the way of it, she said. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish. I nodded. I did not move to Rosemont Street by accident. 3 years ago, before I met Grant, I was reading in the library one Saturday, and I picked up a copy of American Craft Journal. There was an interview in it with a woodworker in Asheville. About walnut, about the patience the wood asks of you, about how the grain will tell you what it wants to be if you slow down enough to listen. I read that interview 3 times. I cut it out. I kept it in a drawer. She took a small breath. When Grant was looking at houses, he wanted West Asheville. I told him Montford was better for resale. He believed me because he does not know the difference. We drove through this block on a Sunday afternoon, and I saw the small blue-gray house with the workshop behind it, and I recognized your name on the mailbox. I did not tell him. I did not come here to do anything, Marcus. I came here to live next to a person I already knew was honest, because I needed to remind myself that that kind of person existed. For a long time, that is all it was. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once. I said, Elena. Why tonight? She said. Because tomorrow morning he flies to San Francisco for 4 days. By the time he lands, I will be gone. I have Vanessa's number. I have a bag packed in the trunk of the Subaru. I have a hotel booked in Weaverville under my maiden name. I am going whether I tell you the truth first or not. But I could not go without telling you, even if you never speak to me again. I looked at her for what felt like a long time, and I did the hardest arithmetic of my life at that kitchen table. There was a version of this night where I could have said yes, where I could have taken her hand and told her she did not need a hotel, and every part of me that was still a man with an empty other side of the bed wanted that version. I said, whatever you need from me tonight, it is not this, not with him asleep upstairs in that house, not with your name still on his mailbox. Go to the hotel, call Vanessa in the morning, file the papers, get yourself free, really free, not free because of me. If you still want to have this conversation after all of that, my door will not have moved, and neither will I. She smiled, a small smile but not a hurt one, the smile of a woman who had already known what I was going to say, and had come anyway, because she had needed the saying of it more than the answer. She said, that is why I told you the truth first. She left the bird on the table. I picked it up and pushed it gently back toward her hand. She took it. She slid it back into the pocket of her cardigan. She walked to the door. I opened it. She crossed our 2 yards in the dark, and I stood on my porch and watched her go inside her own house. The upstairs bedroom light was already off. It stayed off. The next morning her Subaru was gone. There was a small folded note in my mailbox. 6 words. You were right. Thank you. E. 3 days later, Grant flew back from San Francisco early. He pounded on my front door. He was still pounding when the Asheville Police Department pulled into his driveway, because Elena had walked into Vanessa's office at 9 that Monday morning and filed for a restraining order and served him where he stood. A man who loves a woman does not take her when she is still someone else's problem. He waits until she is her own answer. The bravest thing she had ever done was leave. The bravest thing I had ever done was let her leave alone. The first week, she did not text me at all. She was at her sister Nadia's place in Greensboro, in a spare room over a garage that Nadia had once used as a painting studio. I knew she was safe because Vanessa told me she was safe. I did not ask for more than that. She needed a room that was not defined by me any more than it was defined by him. I stayed in my shop. I sanded things that did not need sanding. In the 3rd week, my phone lit up on the workshop bench. It was Elena. One photograph. An old oak side table at a flea market outside Greensboro. Broken stretcher. Water rings you could count, she wrote. Is this savable? I wrote back. Send me the joinery close-up. That was all. That was all either of us needed the exchange to be. By the 2nd month, she was back in Asheville. She had rented a small studio in West Asheville, near the River Arts District, over a print shop. 2 rooms. A skylight, a window that faced east, which she said had been her only condition. Grant had been transferred to Charlotte. The company he worked for had a way of solving public relations problems by giving them a different zip code. The divorce moved fast because he did not contest the money. He contested things on Facebook for a while, until Vanessa sent him a letter and he stopped. By the third month, we started walking. Not dating. Walking. Craggy Gardens on Saturday mornings. Up above the parkway, where the wind came at you clean and did not care what anyone thought. Coffee afterward at a small place off Merrimon that neither of us had ever been to with anyone else. That was on purpose. She said once, without looking at me, "I do not want to sit anywhere with you where I have to unsit with somebody else first." I understood her. I picked places that were only ours. I did not go to her studio. She did not come to my house. We met at third places, cafes, trails, the small gallery at Grovewood where they showed local wood and pottery. When I paid for coffee, I paid for coffee. When she paid, she paid. We were figuring out what the shape of us wanted to be, and we were not going to rush the wood. Some Saturdays we spoke for hours. Some Saturdays we walked most of a mile without saying anything at all, and neither one of us reached for a phone to fill the space. In the 6th month, we held hands for the first time. It was inside the Grovewood Gallery. There was a small exhibit of woodblock prints from a Japanese artist who had died the year before. Mountains, rivers, a single crane against a red disk of a sun. Elena stopped in front of one of them and did not move for a long time. Then, without turning her head, she put her hand on top of mine on the wooden railing in front of the print. Not a squeeze, not a grip, just her palm on the back of my hand, the way you rest a hand on a doorframe to keep yourself steady. I did not pull away. I did not turn to her. We stood there like that for maybe 2 full minutes, in the yellow gallery light, looking at somebody else's crane. 1 year passed like that. In small, careful pieces. She had not moved into my house. We were dating, she called it dating 3 months in, and I made no argument. She had opened Marsh Studio for Deaf Youth Arts on the 2nd floor of that print shop, funded by a small grant from Asheville High and a community foundation that had matched it. She had 11 students in the first cohort. Owen, her nephew, was one of them. Her cousin Renee, the one who had lost her hearing at 7, drove down from Roanoke to help her teach on Saturdays. Elena had a laugh again. A real one. I heard it for the first time at a fall festival on Wall Street, and I stopped walking on the sidewalk, because it took me a second to recognize it as hers. On a Saturday afternoon in October, I asked her to come by the workshop. She had never asked. I had never offered. I told her there was something I wanted to show her. She came at 3. The light through the west window was that particular late fall gold that turns walnut dust into something that looks almost holy. I had built a small shelf, not a piece for anyone else, a piece for the workshop wall, made from the same board of walnut I had picked up the bird's scrap from. 2 years and 8 months earlier, I had saved the rest of that board without ever quite admitting to myself why. In the center of the shelf I had cut a small alcove. A niche. Bird-sized. Not obvious. You had to know what it was for. She stood in front of it for a long moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her jacket, and she took out the walnut bird, the same bird, darker now, worn smooth where her thumb had rested against it 1,000 times. She set it in the niche. It fit like the wood had been waiting for it. She turned around. She smiled at me. And I will tell you something. I had watched her smile 100 times over 3 years. This smile was different. It did not have anything behind it. No fear waiting in a hallway. No man asleep upstairs. Nothing. It was a smile that had finally been allowed to belong only to itself. I kissed her, in that workshop. In the smell of walnut dust and cold coffee and late afternoon sun, her ceramic mug, the one she had brought over from the studio, sat on the workbench next to a half-finished chair rail. Somewhere down the ridge, a freight train rumbled across the Biltmore tracks. Neither of us was in a hurry. We had already learned what hurry was for and what it cost. She pulled back just an inch, and she said, "You made me wait, and I have never been more grateful for anything a man has ever given me." I did not answer with words. I set my forehead against hers, and I closed my eyes, and I let the shop be quiet the way the shop had always been quiet, and this time, for the first time in a very long time, the quiet had someone in it with me. It took 2 years to build the trust, 1 night to test it, and a year after that to earn what came next. None of it, not 1 hour of it, was time I wanted back. There are certain nights at 11 o'clock that redefine the rest of a person's life. Mine was not the night I opened the door for Elena. It was the night I let her walk back out of it, because that was the only way she could ever come back to me truly free. A good man is not the one who says yes when he is begged. A good man is the one who knows when not yet is the kindest phrase in the English language. It is almost never the phrase the other person wants to hear, but sometimes it is the only one that leaves both of you standing when the story is over. Elena did not come to my door to escape her marriage. She came to tell me she had quietly loved me since before I knew her name, and I had enough respect for her to love her enough to send her home, sort out her own life, and come back if she still wanted to. She came back, slowly, freely, owing no one anything. The walnut bird stands on a shelf in our workshop now, in a niche cut to fit it. Both of us know it is not only a bird. Some love arrives at your door in the middle of the night. The good kind waits for morning and comes back. If someone came to your door at 11 o'clock with a truth they had carried in their pocket for 2 years, could you love them enough to send them home first? Is there someone on your street right now whose whole life is quietly falling apart behind a polished front door? And would you know? If Marcus and Elena's story reminded you that patience is its own kind of love, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, and drop a comment below. What is the hardest not yet you have ever said to someone you cared about? I read every single one.